this is Linda, and we're here with our podcast on fundraising, all aspects of fundraising. And I'm really delighted to introduce my guest today. Cecilia Reyes is a dear friend of mine. She's a fellow ACFRE, Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive. And we met kind of accidentally, not knowing that each other existed, as two ACFREs that were living in the same town. She lives in Las Vegas, where I used to live. And she's a specialist in planned giving. And I thought it would be really interesting to talk to Cecilia because a lot of times people don't know how to start a planned giving program. And the first thing they think of is, well, we'll just promote that people can leave us in their will. But there's so much more to building the relationship. And that's what Cecilia is really going to talk about with us today is how we make a connection with donors so that they do want to leave your organization in their estate. So, Cecilia, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the connection of meaning, the meaning of your organization, and what do you think the mission of the organization really means to the donor?
Well, in the first place, they wouldn't be a donor of the organization if the mission didn't mean anything to them, right? And donors in particular will have a deeper connection to the organization because they're actually putting their money where their heart is, right? So I think it's really important to acknowledge with the donor their connection to the mission and talk to them about why the mission is important to them. You know, really find out what their story is with regards to the mission. I think that's an important fact that someone like Linda and myself, or the priest or whoever is also carrying that relationship, should try to discuss, have a conversation with the donor about.
One of the things that you mentioned to me earlier is that the vision and the values of your organization really mean a lot to the donor. And I've always said that nobody's going to give to an organization if they don't share the same values with you. And so many times people really I don't think they communicate their values very well. So how do you think we can communicate our values better and our mission and vision to the donors so they can feel that this is an organization they want to support?
Well, first of all, the organization has to walk the talk. So, many times, organizations will rely on written communication pieces or, advertisements and so on. And really, this is about how we make the donor feels, right? Or the person feels. From the moment they step in the door, how they're greeted, how they're treated. They also can observe how the people in that organization treat each other and what values they uphold, right? So a lot of these values are very simple, very fundamental values, and I think with respect to organizations, there's just a different emphasis or a different focus that aligns with the mission of that organization. So the first way that we communicate values is by actually demonstrating them, like in day-to-day life. And that's something that is a part of the organization's culture.
Could you give us some examples of values that some of your clients have held or organizations that you work for and how they conveyed those values to their donors?
So, for instance, like the parish that I just recently completed a project for, right? So, of course, the value that that the church, the mission, would encourage, would nurture, would be compassion, right? So, the compassion can be demonstrated by the way that the staff, the parish priest, the volunteers, actually relate to the other parishioners, right? And people that come to them. Um, One of the very concrete ways that this parish demonstrates compassion is they have a food pantry that is open to the community, and it's actually well known. It's actually advertised in community publications like the senior magazines and so on. And there are many people that come to the pantry that are not part of the parish and may not even be part of the community where the parish is, but they know about the pantry and they know that they can, go to this pantry and receive food, that they need. And that is compassion very concretely demonstrated by the parish, because the parishioners actually support this pantry with their donations of in-kind groceries as well as cash funds.
I think that's a really great example. My parish also has a pantry, and I don't know how yours works, but mine, people are supposed to make an appointment to come and go to the pantry. And one day I was coming out of Mass, and there was a man standing there, and he said, I wanted to go to the pantry. He said, I live in Kansas City, but I'm in the very suburbs of it. And he said, I walked from downtown Kansas City, which is about a 30-minute drive. So you can imagine how long he was walking to get a meal, to get lunch. And I said, well, you are supposed to have an appointment, but you just go in here and I'm sure somebody will be able to find you something. And they did. And he was so grateful for that. But I think you're right that compassion is certainly a value that many organizations hold dear, and I think that's really important. But how do you think the the charity can connect the donor with those values? I mean, what do they do to really connect with the donors?
So let's not forget that the most important ingredient here is not actually just the food, the groceries that are donated or the funds. It's actually the volunteers,
Hmm.
people who give of their time and who show up and demonstrate that kindness, in serving the people who are in need, who need this food, right? And that is one of the best ways to connect donors to this value is to, invite them to serve in the pantry, to meet with the people who are in need, and to be able to serve them. So I have found that whenever I've asked donors to volunteer at a university, for instance, to maybe do to talk at one of the classes, to serve on a board, they usually find their engagement and their connection with the institution and the mission more fulfilling because they're able to live out that mission and those values that they hold so dear.
I think that's a really great example because I think that engagement and involvement really makes the difference. And when people see that in action, they're going to be more prone. I don't know if you have any statistics on whether people who do leave legacy gifts have been involved and engaged with the organization. But I know from my personal experience, the organizations that I have left in my will are ones that I've been personally engaged and involved with. Is that what you have found also?
Yes, I mean anecdotally, right? we have we have observed that volunteers also make the most generous donors. I mean, this is something that has been borne out by direct experience. I mean, for both of us, right? I've found that board members, for instance, can be more inclined to provide for an organization not only during their lifetime but after their lifetime. They they can be encouraged, or they can, one can suggest that they perhaps regard the charity as like similar to a child, to provide for after they are no longer able to do that. And some of the biggest gifts that I've worked with, some of the most transformative gifts that I've worked with, gifts that I've been able to um, work with a donor with have been from people who were deeply involved in the organization. For instance, as the chair of the founding board of a university, I was able to work with him, and it was his lifelong wish, and actually his dying wish to make this transformative gift to the university to found a medical school. And he actually did. I actually helped to secure that gift, realize that gift during his last year of life.
Mm.
I mean, before he passed away. So these kinds of stories are played out in a lot of the charities. In the latest charity I was involved in, the parish that I did a project for, they received a gift that actually helped another transformative gift, because it was used as a matching gift, and we basically ran a matching challenge for like about 8 weeks, which exceeded the goal, right? Because this donor made this large gift with the condition that it be matched by the parishioners, which was never done before by the parish, but it really excited and energized the parishioners and got everybody involved in supporting that particular goal, philanthropic goal. And this person was also a volunteer, a board member of the Stewardship Council. So it's not only people who are in what you'd call like leadership roles, volunteer leadership roles in organization that might be inclined to make these major gifts, these transformative gifts. But you can also talk with people who are involved in the organization in, say, other more daily um, projects that organization might have. For instance, for this particular parish, the bookstore, or somebody who's a greeter, and they would tell me that they wanted to provide for the parish, and many times what professionals like ourselves would do, or volunteers, um, is provide them the information, the opportunity to realize, to basically facilitate that gift for the charity, because people may have been thinking about it and they've been wanting to do it. It's in their heart, but they don't know how to go about realizing that intention, right? And our job is really to help facilitate that gift that they intend to make.
Right. That challenge is a great idea, but what are maybe some other ways that people can leverage the relationships that they already have, and maybe to inspire others to give also? Do you have any other thoughts on ways that the charities can leverage those relationships?
Well, one of the easiest ways to get people involved is to ask people to volunteer their time and their talent, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's really important um, to not put too much emphasis on the financial gifts, but to acknowledge and cultivate all gifts of the heart in whatever form, right? And to make sure that that we are thanking all of these people whose generosity makes it possible to carry out the mission of the organization.
What do you think about having like planned giving or heritage societies? I know as a fellow member of AFP, you're probably familiar with. I love the names that they chose for. They have an Alpha Society, which are people who give a monthly gift to the AFP Foundation to encourage professionalism and training for new people in the field. But then once you make a commitment to a planned gift, you're part of the Omega Society. And I love that symbolism of the Alpha Society, or those who are just beginning, and the Omega is the final commitment. But do you think that having planned giving societies or heritage societies, do you think that motivates people to give?
I'm actually I'm not sure that that may be the best structure to nurture legacy giving, because the thing is, the philanthropic cycle is actually a continuum, and you can't actually compartmentalize and segment them, and they usually represent the deepening or the ripening of a relationship that particular person has with the organization, with the mission and the people of that organization. So I I, I honestly feel that all donors should be part of that society, and so that people who are at the beginning of the relationship can also interact and learn from the people who are at a more mature level in terms of their involvement and commitment and the kind of fulfillment that they get from their engagement with the organization and the mission.
Mhm. I think that's very true. One of the things that, yeah, I think sometimes people just expect somebody's just going to have a lot of money, so they're going to want to leave us in their will without building that relationship. And to me, I think the way we steward donors is so critical. Can you reflect a little bit on how you steward those beginning donors, those alpha society members, if you want to call them that, to get them to really think more deeply about a long-term commitment? How important do you think stewardship is in this whole process?
Mhm. So, I really do believe in transparency and accountability, and the constant acknowledgement, the expressing gratitude towards the donor. Um, and when I say that, I feel that it's really important to be able to report to the donor about the impact that their commitment has made. I think it's really important for them to know, well, has my gift made a difference? And sometimes the best way to do that, and I believe the best way to do that, is to give them a direct experience of that, what that impact means, right? So, for instance, in the university, it's fairly easy with scholarship donors. We might have an annual event for these donors, and what we try to do, if it's possible for scholarship donors, we try to to arrange an opportunity for them to meet their scholarship recipients, right? If that's not something that the university program currently enables, it might be that we ask the student to write a note, and we include a picture of the student in that note that's mailed to, snail mailed to the donor. That means a lot to them. I've had donors that have kept these mementos from their scholarship recipients, and sometimes they form a relationship with the scholarship recipient that can span a lifetime, right, or lifetimes.
Right.
So to connect them in a very direct and concrete way with the impact that they're making, I think is one of the best ways to steward a donor.
Mhm. I think you're so right about that. I know I have an organization that I support, which I have no real connection with. They were located in South Dakota. I've never lived in South Dakota, but I was very impressed with it. It's a St. Joseph's Indian School. I can tell you the name of it because they do such an excellent job of stewarding their donors. The first time I gave to them, I made an online contribution of like $25. And they instantly, within seconds, thanked me. And then later, and in fact, I have a birthday coming up, and I just got this birthday card in the mail today. First birthday card I got was from the kids at this school. And those are the things that mean, they send me mailing labels and different little gifts and things like that periodically. But the thing that means the most to me is when I get a letter from the student telling me, thanking me for my donation. They don't have any idea, I'm sure, how much I give, but now I give monthly to them. I became a monthly donor. And it was all because of the stewardship that they provided that I was so impressed with that. And when I get these letters from students, they always draw a picture for me. And then
Yes.
they tell me about what their favorite subject is, and they like to play basketball or they like to play video games or whatever they like to do and what they want to do when they grow up. And I said, I'm actually making an impact, even though I'm not a major donor, but my little monthly gift, I think, is making an
Yeah.
impact on these people. So I think that stewardship is really
Yeah.
critical.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you have to, of course, like really provide oversight over the stewardship program so that it's really the donors are receiving acknowledgement and tokens of appreciation that they that they can enjoy and appreciate, right? I remember um, my husband and I once gave fairly generously. I mean, for us, it wasn't a very big gift, but it was apparently a very big gift to a charity that distributed rice, like bags of rice to families in Asia. And they had called me, and I said, well, as a professional, it would be good if you like thank people for that, right? That's a good way. I mean, do you do that? How do you thank your donors? That's how you encourage them to make a recurring gift, right? So he took that idea and he had all the donors write letters. And because the gift that we gave was a fairly generous one and bought a lot of bags, we were inundated by thank you letters from these people. And it's just like, I really didn't want all these people to be working so hard to be writing us letters. And so that, you have to think about like, well, how do you deal with that? Because maybe for people who are a little bit more, who give like larger gifts or whose gift generates, I mean, gives benefits for a lot more people. Maybe you want to recognize them or acknowledge them in a different way, like, or maybe just have like a few letters go out, or a letter from the president, with a picture of the people that received the rice instead of. So you also have to look at what are the ways that are meaningful for the donors that you should acknowledge them, in the way that they feel best appreciated or in a way that is meaningful for them.
This is really great information, I think. And I know that you're doing consulting now, and we will be giving people ways to contact you and your website and everything when they view this podcast. But if somebody were to contact you and say, we want to start a planned giving program in our organization and we've never done anything like this, what would be some of your best advice to people to get started in planned giving, and what can you help them with?
Well, the first thing you have to do is, of course, do an assessment of your donor base and your constituents and stakeholders, right? And then and that means doing a lot of data analysis and that sort of thing. But you also want to survey your constituents and stakeholders and your donors. You should be able to identify who are the people who are most engaged in the organization, the length of time of engagement, the fidelity of their engagement, because those are really good indicators of the plan giving potential of that particular organization. And then, in surveying the stakeholders and constituents, so you would survey the board, you would survey different groups, right? Because they're all going to come from different places and have different capacities and ways that they engage with the organization. Part of that survey should also ask questions about how they would like to be engaged, and also measure their interest in plan giving. So that gives you some guidance, right? Because you're actually hearing directly from them and able to assess, what the current interest is, what perhaps might be the capacity, and how they might be best engaged in this whole process of, building a culture of philanthropy that matures into legacy giving.
And if people are let's say they're in a very small organization, they don't have a big staff, and they think, oh, we can't start that because we'd have to engage attorneys and everybody else to help us. What would be your best advice to those small organizations that how they can cultivate legacy giving without being, a staff of 20 people?
Well, this is where you can really identify where the resources in terms of people and their expertise and experience are in your organization. Because in every organization, no matter how small, you're going to have people from all walks of life, right? You're probably going to have realtors, lawyers, accountants, doctors, and what have you. And what you want to do is you want to invite these people to volunteer their time and their leadership to form groups, councils, or boards to work on this project. Because ultimately, these gifts are going to be coming from these groups of people. And when they're able to talk about it and when they're able to assess the situation and really understand the situation, status of their organization, and learn the value of their own generosity in supporting and sustaining the mission, then they can devise ways of how they can support the organization more effectively, right? And the mission.
Terrific.
Yeah. So it's gonna have to come from within. So what you have to do is you have to create the structures so people can participate in, gathering, discussing, discerning how to support the mission more effectively as individuals and as groups.
That's fantastic. And you can help people sort that out no matter what size organization they are.
Yes,
You can.
yes. You start out by asking them for a gift of time and talent, whatever their talent is. Because once you have a board, or a council where you have a realtor, you have a lawyer, you have a CPA, do your
You
own plan giving,
can,
right?
right.
You probably just need to like maybe hire a consultant like me to
Mhm.
guide you through that process. But you can maybe have a weekend where the focus is on plan giving. You provide resources to the parishioners, and you provide, like maybe the lawyer will provide free advice during that weekend or review wills, during that weekend. So you can provide that structure to facilitate these sort of gifts. You can do testimonials, like if it was a parish during at the end of the mass, towards the end of the mass or at the beginning of the mass. So there are ways that the parish can move forward with this sort of initiative with the proper guidance from a professional, and then grow their own structure, grow their own infrastructure, their support system for that sort of undertaking.
I think this is really encouraging to people because a lot of times when I talk to clients in small organizations, they're just so far from thinking about legacy gifts. They think that's something that only the universities and the hospitals and the people that have a big staff can do. But it's very encouraging to know that there are people like you around, and especially I would encourage people to contact Cecilia if you are in a smaller organization or a larger organization, but you need help getting started with this because legacy giving is always one of those things that seems very mysterious to people. Like, well, I don't know enough about wills and estates. I'm not a lawyer. I can't guide them with that. But you make it sound so simple and so easy.
Well, the reason is because the reality about legacy giving is most gifts, perhaps 99% of all gifts, are very simple bequests
Mhm.
or beneficiary designations, which I encourage, right? So there are tax and financial consequences when you designate certain assets to individuals or organizations. And when you designate them to a tax exempt organizations like charities, there are advantages as well to your estate and financial planning. And so one of the things I encourage people to look at is to, if they are at a certain age, over 70 and so on, is to use their IRAs or their retirement assets,
Mhm.
and perhaps direct the required minimum distributions towards charities so they don't end up with additional income that they would have to pay additional taxes for.
Mhm.
Um, because many times they are already supporting this charity, but they're doing it with after tax money instead of the pre-tax money that's sitting in their retirement account. Retirement accounts are also great for adding a charity as a beneficiary, because when you add your own child or an individual, a non-tax exempt entity as a beneficiary of these special accounts, I call them, with pre-tax money, you may end up like having, I mean, your heirs may end up having to pay a larger tax bill. So these are like the assets that are best, you know, um, given to charities. So there's some very, very simple ways to to make a legacy gift. And most people really do it in a very direct way through their will. 99% of people will do it that way, or make name the charity as a beneficiary. And I always remind people, you don't have to name that charity as the beneficiary of the total asset. You can name them a partial beneficiary, like maybe they get 10% of your IRA or 50%. You can divide them among your charities. So there are very, very simple ways to make a legacy gift if the intention is there.
That's really helpful. And I know I've done this, and I always encourage people to also talk to their children and let them know so their children aren't surprised. And I know when I talked it over with my children, they all said, Mom, just, we don't need the money. I mean, not that they're rich, but they felt like it was my money and they knew how committed I was to my church especially. And I said, I'm going to leave X number of dollars in my estate for the church, and they get their money before it's divided between my children. So I think when you talk to your kids about that, most people, I think, will be in a position where their children know that they have commitments to certain charities and they want to continue that support and do something in honor of their parents. So I think it's not as difficult as it sounds like it might be. And like you said, the tax that they're going to have to pay, maybe they'll want to give it to charity so they don't have to pay the taxes. So,
there are assets that are better inherited by your heirs, and assets that maybe might be better suited for charities, tax-exempt organizations.
Right. Well, this has been really, really helpful. I think you've given a lot of smaller nonprofits some encouragement to think that this is not this mysterious thing that they have to be an attorney or really knowledgeable about all the different ways of giving planned gifts. They can contact someone like you. I certainly recommend that they contact you, Cecilia, to help them go through this. But are there any other final thoughts that you have that you'd like to share with the group?
I got involved in philanthropy because I was able to experience the joy that philanthropy engenders, not only to the people or the missions, the causes that philanthropy supports. A lot of the joy actually is felt by the donor in making their gift, and that's something that I find is most gratifying in practicing my profession, and that's what I feel is something that I encourage everybody to give themselves a chance to experience, to be able to make a gift from the heart during their lifetime. Because that is the joy that is just really priceless.
Right. Well, I'm going to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy lady, and I really appreciate this. And we're going to probably have Cecilia back at a future time in our spiritual podcast, because she's also a very spiritual person. You've probably figured that out by now. So I'm going to have her back to do a spiritual podcast with me at some point in the future. But I want to thank you for your time, and look forward to talking to you more and seeing you again next time I get to Vegas.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, thank you.